for me, the journey, when you were beginning by speaking about what Ubiquity University does and that emphasis on spirituality and that emphasis on the fullness of the being, it's a perfect place actually to begin the sharing of my journey, because that really is what I have learned so deeply. I grew up in California, in Los Angeles, in a very, very typical in many ways, atypical in other ways, of course, but very typical in terms of the upper class, privileged, well-educated American family. And I had access to everything. All of the best of the education, of the opportunities. My parents gave me everything. And as you said, yes, I graduated from Stanford, and I graduated there with a degree in psychology. I then was in the midst of doing my PhD when I came to India. And the thing that was so acutely obvious to me about 2 weeks after I got here, within the first, I don't know, few hours of being here in Rishikesh, I had this extraordinary transformation, spiritual awakening. I mean, we can give a whole bunch of labels to it, none of which actually even begins to touch the experience of standing on the banks of the Ganga River, not even knowing that the river was sacred, not having any expectations nor any yearnings. I wasn't even spiritual enough to know that I was on a spiritual quest. I would have told you that I wasn't spiritual. I would have even said, that spirituality wasn't for me, that I wasn't one of those people, that I was much more academically inclined. And I didn't even realize how deeply I was being pulled and how deeply I was being called. And when I stood on the banks of Ganga, it was as though this veil was pulled off of me. But it wasn't just a veil over my eyes. It was literally a veil over every way of knowing that I had. So a veil over my mind, over my brain, over my identity, over every aspect of who I thought I was, how I thought I knew the world. And it was pulled off. And I could see. And what I saw was so exquisite that pretty much all I could do was cry and say, oh my God, it's so beautiful. And that was the spiritual transformation, the awakening, the touch, the moment, whatever semantics we want to use for it. It was the experiential spiritual moment. And a couple of weeks later, I was sitting with Pujya Swamiji, who's my guru, one of India's most renowned and revered spiritual leaders. And I was sitting in his presence in the room where he met people. He gave what's called darshan. Just whoever wanted to come was welcome to just come and to sit in his presence. And sometimes people wanted just blessings. Sometimes they had a specific question, whatever it might have been. And sitting in that room, I had this awareness that I didn't actually know anything. And it was an incredible realization that here I was, someone who had graduated from, a top great prep school in LA, and then from Stanford University, and then was getting a PhD. Someone who I had always thought was quite intelligent. And I realized sitting in that room, I realized I don't actually know anything. I mean, I've accumulated a lot of facts. I can regurgitate a lot of facts, a lot of information. I've got a good memory. I can read something and memorize it and give it back to you on an exam. All of that which we had mistaken for actual wisdom, for actual knowing. And I realized as I sat there and as I watched this incredible being, I didn't speak a word of Hindi at that time, so I couldn't actually understand the words he was speaking. But just the way that he interacted, just the love, the pure love from him into these beings. And all of that which I had experienced in the 2 weeks prior to that already, so many experiences of the heart just opening and exploding and expanding, and the awarenesses and all of that, I realized, my God, I didn't actually know anything. And so for me, it's been this incredible journey from thinking that I knew so much, thinking that I had so much, to actually realizing how little I knew about life, about really what mattered, about really who I was. I mean, I had all these labels, whether they were academic labels, whether they were cultural labels, whether they were labels given by a variety of psychologists or therapists, or labels I had come up with in my psychology program. But that was taxonomy. That wasn't understanding. And it was here, immersed in a spiritual experience, and one that was rooted in giving and serving, where I was taught from the very beginning, serve, give. You've been given so much. Just give and give and give. I remember, I'll share a very sweet story from the very beginning. I had gone in, it was the very first time that I was alone with Pujya Swamiji. And I had been having all of these incredible experiences for the past few weeks of just literally seeing the divine. Wherever I would look, whatever I was looking at, I was seeing the divine in them. And I wasn't sleeping. I was just crying tears of ecstasy. I mean, I remember lying in my bed in the night, feeling like my heart was just burning through the wooden bed frame. And that how was I going to explain in the morning that I had burned a hole straight through the bed frame if I lay on my stomach and if I lay on my back, feeling like my heart was expanding so much that I was just going to take down the walls and the ceiling, and oh my God, the whole building was going to crumble. And finally I was given this moment alone to see him. I had requested it, and I was given these few moments, and I said to him, I feel so blessed. I've been given so much. I had, in addition to those experiences, I had this very powerful forgiveness experience of things that had happened to me in my childhood, ways that I had been traumatized and scarred, things that had affected my own self-identity, or rather had really been my own self-identity. So I'd had so many of these experiences, and I said to Swamiji, I said, I feel so blessed. You've given me so much. I want to give back. What can I do for you? And that was just what I said. I said, what can I do for you? And he looked at me, and you have to just picture the scene. I was 25. I had tears of ecstasy streaming down my face. I had no idea about India, about Hinduism. I had no idea about the vows of sannyas, the monastic tradition. I didn't know anything. He was a religious renunciant since early childhood. We're alone in this room. I don't know anyone who knows him. There's no way that our worlds overlap in any way. It was in the day long before social media or anything like that. And here I am saying to him, what can I give you? Anything. And he looks at me very seriously and he says, anything? And I said, yeah, anything. And of course, in my brain, I can hear my mom's voice yelling at me, saying, just stand up, walk out of the room, just leave. I've got my mom's voice. I've got my very, very renowned psychology of mind control professor, Dr. Phil Zimbardo, my favorite professor from Stanford. I've got his voice in my mind saying, just leave. Just walk out of that room. But I knew that whatever it was, anything, yes, I would do it. And he looks at me more seriously even, and he says, do you promise? And again, I can hear this chorus of Dr. Zimbardo and my mother just screaming at me to get out of the room, to just stand up and walk out. But my heart knew. And my heart knew that, yeah, whatever he asked, yes, I promised I would give. So I said, yeah, I promise. And suddenly he smiles and the seriousness broke. And he says to me, okay, 3 things. He said, first of all, I want you to get closer and closer to God every day. Every day at the end of the day. You should be closer to God than you were when you woke up. He said, second, serve the world. Every minute, every moment, every breath. He said, you've been given so much. Use it. Serve the world. And he said, third, be happy. He said, any sadness you have, any pain you have, just give it to me. And he held out his hands like that. He said, just give it to me. And it was an extraordinary moment on so many levels. But the teaching was very, very profound and very deep of this is what your life is for. To serve, to give. To get closer and closer to God. It's not about how much can I get, how much can I earn, how much can I attain, how high can I climb the ladder. Whether it's the career ladder or the social ladder or the financial ladder or whatever ladder it may be. Just serve. And what's amazing is that these 3, although they seemed like 3 separate bullet points at the time, I've realized they are inextricably linked. That the closer you get to God, the more you serve. It's part of the package. It comes very naturally. The more you serve, the closer you get to God. And the more of both of those you have, the happier you are. It's like that intersection of Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. Jnana Yoga, the yoga of wisdom that brings us the real happiness. Not the I got an ice cream cone happiness, but the real joy that comes only from truth. and karma yoga, the yoga of action, and how they're not just three separate bullet points, but actually they are inextricably linked. And for me, it's been just a continual amazing experience of unfolding of all of these layers, and of recommitting myself every day, of choosing again every day to get closer to God, to serve the world, and to be happy.